Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something pretty wild, what hygiene was actually like during the Black Plague. And let me tell you, after hearing this story, you're going to be real grateful for modern plumbing and hand sanitizer. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to 14th century Europe. So congratulations, you just woke up in medieval Europe 1347. Your eyes blink open in the dim light of dawn, filtering through the cracks of your small wooden home. You're not lying on a soft mattress with Egyptian cotton sheets. Nope, you're on a straw-filled sack on the floor, sharing the warmth with your entire family. That musty smell filling your nostrils? Well, honestly, you can't remember the last time. The straw crunches as you shift positions. Itchy little bites pepper your skin. You scratch absently, used to the constant companionship of fleas and lice that call your bedding home. They're just part of life. Everyone has them. From the poorest peasant to the richest noble, these little biters don't discriminate, though the nobles might change their straw a bit more often than you can afford to. A rustling sound catches your attention. Rats. They're everywhere in medieval Europe, in the walls, under the floorboards, in the thatched roof above. They scurry through the streets, the fields, the storage bins where grain is kept. Nobody thinks much about them. They're just another fact of life, like the mud in the streets or the smoke from the cooking fires. You sit up, your back stiff from the hard floor. The rest of your family is still sleeping. Your spouse, your children, maybe your parents or in-laws too. Everyone piled together in one room, bodies providing warmth against the morning chill. Privacy isn't really a concept in 1347. Not for ordinary folks, anyway. Good news, you do actually wash your face and hands most mornings. Despite what people think about medieval hygiene, folks did try to stay reasonably clean when they could. Bad news, the water comes from the same well that everyone in the neighborhood uses, and it's questionable at best. You splash the cold water on your face from a wooden basin. No soap, though. Well, not like we think of soap today. Making soap is a whole complicated process involving ashes and animal fat, and most regular people don't bother with it daily. The rich might have fancy olive oil soaps, but you're not rich. You're just trying to get through another day without catching whatever illness is going around this season. And man, there's always something going around. Fevers, flux, consumption, sweating, sickness. Life is fragile. You've already buried at least a couple of children. Everyone has. It's just how things are. You step outside to relieve yourself. If you're lucky, your home has a designated area for this, maybe a bucket or a hole in the ground. If you're not so lucky, or if it's too cold to venture outside, there might be a chamber pot under the bed. Either way, the waste doesn't go far. It might be tossed into the street, or if you're a bit more considerate, carried to the nearest river or stream. Yeah, the same rivers and streams where people collect water and wash clothes. Sense a problem brewing? The streets aren't exactly what you'd call clean. In cities, they're narrow, muddy, and filled with, well, everything. Human waste, animal waste, food scraps. Whatever people don't want inside their homes ends up outside. The smell is something modern noses would find unbearable. But you're used to it. That's just what life smells like. In some of the more advanced cities, there might be laws against dumping waste in the streets, but they're rarely enforced. In many places, pigs roam freely, eating whatever garbage they find. It's a primitive waste disposal system, but it's what you've got. You make your way to the town well to draw water for the day. Women are gathered there, chatting, exchanging news and gossip. This is the medieval social media, face-to-face conversations where information, both reliable and not, spreads from person to person. "Did you hear about the strange illness in the southern port cities?" one woman whispers. "They say people are dying by the hundreds." "It's God's punishment," another replies firmly, "for the sins of the people. I heard it was the Jews poisoning the wells," a third adds, her voice dropping even lower. You listen, a slight chill running down your spine despite the morning sun warming your face. Rumours of illness aren't new, but something about the way they're talking, the fear in their voices, feels different. You push the thoughts away. There's work to be done, food to prepare, animals to tend, fields to work, depending on your station in life. Medieval life doesn't leave much time for worrying about things happening in distant cities. Back home, you break your fast with a chunk of dark bread and maybe some ale. Yes, ale, even for breakfast. Water isn't always trusted for drinking, but the brewing process makes ale safer. Even children drink it, though it's weaker than what adults consume. Your teeth? They're probably not in great shape. Dental hygiene consists of maybe rubbing them with a rough cloth or using a chewed stick as a makeshift toothbrush. Some people rinse with wine or vinegar to freshen their breath. The rich might use mixtures containing herbs or honey. Toothaches are common and devastating. There's not much to be done except perhaps pulling the offending tooth if it gets bad enough. As the day progresses, you go about your business. Maybe you're a craftsperson working leather or metal or wood. Maybe you're a farmer tending crops or animals. Maybe you're a merchant selling goods in the marketplace. Whatever your trade, it likely involves physical labor, dirt, and sweat. Speaking of sweat, contrary to popular belief, medieval people did bathe. Not daily, perhaps, but they didn't go their whole lives without washing either. How often you bathe depends on a few things: your social status, where you live, the time of year, and your access to water. If you're in a city, there might be public bathhouses where you can go to get clean. These are social places where people gather not just to bathe, but to socialize, eat, drink, and relax. Some are gender segregated, others aren't. Some have reputations for activities beyond just bathing, if you catch my drift. If you're wealthy, you might have a wooden tub that servants fill with heated water for your private bath. If you're of more modest means, bathing might be a communal affair in a larger tub or a quick wash in a river or stream during warmer months. But here's the thing. Bathing is becoming less common. There's a growing belief among physicians that water, especially hot water, opens the pores and makes the body vulnerable to illness. This idea will gain more traction in the coming years, especially after the events about to unfold. As you move through your day, you're surrounded by smells that would overwhelm a modern person. Body odor, yes, but also smoke from fires, animals and their waste, food, both fresh and rotting, tanning leather, dyeing cloth. All the processes of medieval life create a tapestry of odors that's just the backdrop of your existence. You don't notice it anymore. Some people carry small pomanders, balls of scented materials like herbs, flowers, or spices, to hold near their noses when passing particularly foul-smelling areas. Others tuck fragrant herbs into their clothes. The wealthy might use perfumes made with exotic ingredients, but mostly people just live with the smells. As evening approaches, you might stop by the local tavern for some stronger ale and conversation. News travels slowly in the medieval world, but it does travel. Merchants, pilgrims, and other travellers bring stories from distant places, and the stories they're bringing now are troubling. There are whispers of a terrible disease sweeping through Mediterranean ports. They say it started somewhere in the east, maybe China or India, and travelled along the trade routes. They say it kills quickly and horribly. They say no one knows how to stop it. Some call it the Great Mortality. Later, people will call it the Black Death. You don't know it yet, sitting there with your ale, but you're about to experience one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, and all those hygiene practices we've been talking about, they're about to be put to the test. The year is 1347, and the plague has just arrived in Europe. In October of that year, 12 ships dock at the Sicilian port of Messina. They've come from the Black Sea carrying cargo and something else, something invisible and deadly. Most of the sailors aboard these ships are already dead or dying from a mysterious illness. The few still alive are covered in black boils oozing blood and pus. The Sicilian authorities quickly order the ships out of the harbour, but it's too late. The Black Death has arrived in Europe. The disease spreads with terrifying speed. From Sicily, it moves to the mainland of Italy, then across the Mediterranean to North Africa. By 1348, it's in France, Spain, and Portugal. By 1349, it's reached England, Scotland, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and parts of Eastern Europe. You didn't know about germs or bacteria or viruses. No one did. Microscopes won't be invented for centuries. The idea that tiny, invisible creatures could enter your body and make you sick would have seemed like fantasy. Instead, people had other explanations for disease. The most common was the theory of miasma, bad air. It was believed that disease spread through foul odours emanating from rotting organic matter. This wasn't entirely wrong. Areas with poor sanitation did tend to have more illness, but it missed the actual mechanism of transmission. Other theories were less scientific. Many believed the plague was divine punishment for humanity's sins. Some blamed particular groups, especially Jews, leading to horrific persecutions. Some thought it was caused by an unfavourable alignment of planets. Some believed it could be spread by sight, that just looking at a plague victim could infect you. In the absence of understanding, fear flourished, and there was plenty to fear. The symptoms of the plague were horrifying. The most common form was bubonic plague, characterized by painful swollen lymph nodes called buboes, particularly in the neck, armpit, and groin. These buboes could grow as large as an apple, turning black as they filled with blood and pus. Victims also suffered high fevers, vomiting, delirium, and bleeding under the skin that caused dark blotches. There was also pneumonic plague, which infected the lungs and could be spread directly from person to person through coughing and sneezing, and septicemic plague, where the bacteria infected the bloodstream. These forms were even deadlier than the already lethal bubonic form. Without antibiotics or modern medical care, the mortality rate was staggering. In some places, 80% of those infected died. Overall, it's estimated that the Black Death killed between 75 and 200 million people, up to 60% of Europe's entire population. As the plague approaches your town, daily life begins to change. Fear grips communities. Some people flee to the countryside, hoping to escape infection. Others lock themselves in their homes, refusing to interact with anyone. Some turn to religion, participating in mass prayers and processions. Others abandon restraint entirely, figuring they might as well enjoy whatever time they have left. The authorities, such as they are, try to implement measures to control the spread. Some cities ban outsiders from entering, others require quarantines for new arrivals. The word quarantine comes from the Italian 40 giorni, meaning 40 days, the length of time ships were required to remain isolated before passengers and crew could go ashore in some Italian cities. But none of it seems to work. The plague continues its inexorable spread, leaving death and devastation in its wake, and now it's reached your town. The first cases appear on the outskirts, a family living near the road that leads to the next town over. They'd hosted a travelling merchant a few days prior. Now they're all sick. Word spreads quickly. People are frightened. Some immediately blame the family. They must have sinned grievously for God to punish them so. Others quietly pack up their belongings, planning to leave before the disease can take hold. The local priest leads prayers for deliverance. The town's meagre medical practitioners, probably not university-trained physicians who are rare and expensive, but rather barber surgeons, herbalists, midwives, or others with some healing knowledge, prepare what remedies they can. But medieval medicine has little to offer against the plague. Treatments range from ineffective to actively harmful. Bloodletting, a common medical practice of the time, likely weakened patients who were already fighting a serious infection. Herbal remedies might have provided some comfort, but couldn't kill the bacteria causing the disease. Poultices applied to buboes sometimes helped them rupture, which could actually be beneficial, but the process was agonizing and still rarely led to recovery. Some plague doctors, though this specialized role won't be fully developed until later outbreaks, recommend aromatic herbs and spices to purify the air. People carry posies of flowers or pomanders of herbs, thinking they'll ward off the miasma of disease. Others turn to more extreme measures. Flagellants travel from town to town, whipping themselves bloody in public displays of penance, believing that by punishing themselves they might appease God's wrath. You feel a deepening sense of dread as more people fall ill. Your neighbour's child first, then the baker, then 3 members of the same family living near the church. The symptoms are unmistakable and horrifying. The healthy do what they can for the sick, but fear of contagion is strong and many sufferers are left to face their final hours alone. Those who do care for the ill try various folk remedies. Some bathe the sick in vinegar or rosewater, believing it will cool the fever and purify the body. Others, following the medical theories of the day, create poultices of herbs, bread, or even more bizarre ingredients like dried toad or arsenic. Some lance the buboes and drain the pus, which is excruciating for the patient and dangerous for the caregiver, as the material is highly contagious. You watch from a distance as the town sexton and his assistants dig graves. At first individual ones, but as the number of dead increases, they switch to mass burials. The church bell tolls so often it becomes a constant backdrop to daily life, until there are too many dead to announce individually, and the bell falls silent. The smell of death joins the already pungent odours of medieval life. Bodies awaiting burial are wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared, but there's not always time or materials to do even this properly. In some hard-hit areas, corpses are simply piled in the streets until collection carts can come around. You notice that certain groups seem to be faring better than others. The Jewish community, with its religious emphasis on cleanliness and hand-washing, has a lower infection rate, but this leads not to an adoption of their hygiene practices, but to accusations that they are somehow causing the plague, perhaps by poisoning wells. Such accusations will lead to horrific violence against Jewish communities across Europe. As days turn to weeks, the rhythm of normal life dissolves. Fields lie untended as farmers fall ill or flee. Markets are empty or sparsely attended. Church services continue, but with dwindling congregations. The tavern remains open, but the atmosphere has changed from sociable to desperate, as people drink to forget what's happening around them. You find yourself growing increasingly anxious about every physical sensation. Is that slight headache the beginning of the plague, or just the result of poor sleep? Is that ache in your armpit a swelling bubo, or just a strained muscle from yesterday's work? And always, there's the question of what to do. Stay and risk infection, flee and risk bringing the disease to wherever you go, not to mention facing the dangers of the road in medieval times. Lock yourself away and hope the plague passes you by, carry on as normal, trusting in God's will. There are no good options. Your muscles relax a bit more as you sink deeper into the bed, feeling the weight of these impossible choices our ancestors faced. The dim light of medieval dawn slowly fading as you shift positions, finding that perfect spot as your breathing slows naturally while the plague spreads through the narrow streets where The narrow streets where you live become even more perilous. It's been a few weeks since the plague first appeared in your town, and now it's everywhere. The morning fog hangs low, making the world seem smaller, more closed in. You can barely see the end of your street through the mist. And maybe that's a blessing. Fewer bodies to count. People are trying everything they can think of to avoid getting sick. The wealthier folks have fled to country estates, hoping distance will save them. Spoiler alert, it usually doesn't. The plague follows the fleeing nobles along trade routes and roads like a shadow you can't outrun. You've noticed that nobody smells bad anymore, or more accurately, everyone smells bad so you don't notice it. But there's a new smell in town: vinegar. Lots and lots of vinegar. People are washing with it, gargling it, soaking cloths in it to wear over their faces. The sharp, acidic scent burns your nostrils, but it's better than the alternative, the sickly sweet smell of death that seeps from houses marked with a red cross. Speaking of washing, remember those public bathhouses I mentioned? They're closed now. Word has spread that bathing opens the pores and makes you more vulnerable to disease. Physicians warn against the dangers of water touching the skin, especially warm water. And when you see that most of the bathhouse workers were among the first to die, well, it's hard to argue with that kind of evidence. So bathing becomes something people avoid. The rich might still wash with rose water or vinegar-soaked cloths. The poor make do with even less. A quick wipe of the face and hands with a damp cloth is about all the cleaning most people are doing now. Full-body immersion in water? Forget about it. Too dangerous. Not that anyone's paying much attention to how others smell. When you're surrounded by death, body odor seems like a trivial concern. What people are concerned about is the air itself. The miasma theory, the idea that disease spreads through bad air, has taken firm hold. It's not entirely wrong. The plague actually can spread through the air in its pneumonic form, though no one understands the mechanism yet. But the methods people use to protect themselves are creative. Sweet-smelling herbs and flowers are in high demand. People carry nosegays, small bouquets to hold to their noses when walking through the streets. Wealthier citizens wear pomanders, perforated balls filled with ambergris, herbs and spices hanging from chains around their necks or belts. The intense fragrances are believed to purify the air before it enters the lungs. Some take it further, burning aromatic woods and herbs in their homes or in the streets, creating a haze of fragrant smoke that mingles with the ever-present fog. Juniper, rosemary, thyme, wormwood, anything that smells strong and clean is tossed onto fires. And then there are the more extreme measures. Some people believe that strong smells of any kind will drive away the plague, leading to some truly foul options. One remedy involves standing over an open latrine, breathing deeply of the noxious fumes. Others recommend holding a handkerchief soaked in urine over the nose and mouth. Yes, you heard that right. People are deliberately smelling shit and piss to avoid getting sick, and in a world where no one understands germ theory, it doesn't seem any crazier than anything else. Speaking of urine, it's not just for smelling. Some believe it has medicinal properties. Bathing in urine, usually your own, is recommended as a preventative measure. Others suggest drinking it. Medieval medicine is a wild ride, folks. But what about the actual disease-carrying culprits? The rats and fleas that are the real vectors of bubonic plague are everywhere, completely unchecked. Rats scurry through homes, granaries, streets and sewers, carrying infected fleas that jump to human hosts. No one makes the connection. How could they? The idea that a tiny insect bite could cause such devastating illness is beyond the medical understanding of the time. Instead, as the death toll rises, people look for other explanations, and too often they find scapegoats. The Jewish communities, with their religious emphasis on cleanliness and hand-washing, tend to have lower infection rates. This should be a clue that hygiene matters, but instead it leads to horrific accusations. Christians claim that Jews are poisoning wells to spread the plague deliberately. This conspiracy theory spreads almost as fast as the disease itself, leading to massacres across Europe. In some cities, Jewish people are rounded up and burned alive. In others, they're given the choice to convert to Christianity or face execution. Some communities are entirely wiped out, not by the plague, but by their neighbors. The Pope himself speaks out against these persecutions, pointing out that Jews are dying from the plague too, but fear and ignorance are powerful forces. Other marginalized groups face similar persecution. Lepers, already isolated from society, are accused of spreading disease. So are foreigners, travelers, and basically anyone who seems different. Cats, believed to be associated with the devil, are killed in large numbers, which ironically probably helps the rat population thrive, spreading more plague. Meanwhile, those tasked with healing the sick are fighting a losing battle. University-trained physicians are rare and expensive, mostly serving nobility. The common people rely on a mix of practitioners, barber surgeons, apothecaries, herbalists, midwives, and empirics. Healers, who learn through experience rather than formal education. These healers do what they can, working with the medical knowledge available, which is based largely on the theory of the four humours. According to this theory, the body contains four fluids, or humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, which must be kept in balance for good health. Illness occurs when these humours are out of balance. Treatment, therefore, focuses on restoring balance. For the plague, this often means bloodletting, cutting a vein to drain excess blood from the body. Leeches might be applied for the same purpose. Purgatives and emetics are administered to expel bad humours through vomiting and defecation. None of this helps, of course. In fact, bloodletting probably weakens patients who are already fighting a serious infection. But in the absence of understanding about bacteria and infection, it's the best medical science has to offer. Some healers take a more herbal approach, creating complex mixtures of plants, minerals, and animal products. Theriac, a compound containing dozens of ingredients including opium and sometimes ground-up viper flesh, is a popular but expensive remedy. More common are poultices of herbs applied directly to buboes, or teas and tinctures to be consumed. Religious remedies are just as common as medical ones. People pray, make offerings, and participate in processions to beseech God for mercy. Some towns organize massive religious demonstrations, hoping collective piety will stem the tide of death. The most extreme example are the flagellants, groups of religious zealots who travel from town to town, whipping themselves bloody in public displays of penance. They believe that by punishing themselves they might appease God's wrath and end the plague. Crowds gather to watch these grim processions, both horrified and hopeful. But no amount of bloodletting, herbal remedies, or self-flagellation seems to make a difference. The plague continues its deadly march through communities, killing indiscriminately. As the crisis deepens, a specialized role emerges in some areas. The plague doctor, though the iconic beaked mask won't become standard until later outbreaks, physicians who specifically treat plague victims begin to adopt protective clothing. They wear long waxed cloaks, gloves, and head coverings, trying to minimize skin exposure. Some carry wands or sticks to examine patients without touching them. These early plague doctors also use herbs and aromatics to protect themselves, following the miasma theory. They stuff herbs into masks or hold pomanders near their faces when treating the sick. Some even smoke tobacco, recently introduced to Europe, believing the smoke will purify the air they breathe. Their treatments are limited and largely ineffective. They lance buboes to drain the infected pus, apply various poultices and herbal preparations, administer purges and emetics, and perform bloodletting. They keep meticulous records of symptoms and outcomes, trying to make sense of the disease, but without understanding its true cause, they make little progress. For most victims, the presence of a plague doctor is less about hope for recovery and more about preparing for death. These physicians often serve as witnesses for hastily drafted wills and provide what comfort they can to the dying. The dead present their own problems. In normal times, burial is a religious affair with established rituals. Bodies are washed, dressed in clean clothes, and laid out for a period of watching before burial in consecrated ground, usually the churchyard. Prayers are said, bells are rung, and the community gathers to mourn. But these aren't normal times. There are too many dead for traditional burials. Church bells that initially tolled for each death eventually fall silent. There are simply too many to announce. Gravediggers can't keep up with the demand for their services. Coffins run out, then shrouds, until bodies are simply wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared or dumped directly into mass graves. In the hardest-hit areas, collection carts move through the streets, accompanied by calls of "Bring out your dead." Bodies are piled onto these carts and transported to mass burial pits outside town walls. Sometimes the collectors are criminals, forced into this grim work in exchange for pardons or payment. Sometimes they're desperate people who have lost everything and need the money. The burial pits themselves are nightmarish, huge trenches filled with layer upon layer of corpses, covered with quicklime to speed decomposition and reduce odour. When one pit is filled, another is dug. In some places, the dead are so numerous that they're simply left where they fall, or piled in empty houses that are then burned. The normal rituals that help people process grief are largely abandoned. There's no time for proper mourning when death is everywhere. Survivors become numb to loss, focusing on immediate survival rather than emotional processing. And survival becomes increasingly challenging as the social fabric unravels. Fields lie untended as farmers die or flee. Food becomes scarce in some areas. Markets close or operate sporadically. Essential services break down as those who provide them succumb to the disease. In some towns, governance collapses entirely. Officials die or abandon their posts, leaving no one to maintain order. In others, emergency powers are granted to crisis committees, who implement increasingly strict measures to contain the plague: quarantines, travel restrictions, bans on public gatherings. Quarantine emerges as a key strategy in port cities, where ships are required to remain isolated offshore for a period, usually 40 days, the origin of the term quarantine from quarantagiorni in Italian, before crew or cargo can come ashore. On land, infected households are often locked in their homes, sometimes with guards posted to ensure compliance. These measures are harsh, but not entirely misguided. Although people don't understand the actual mechanism of disease transmission, they observe that limiting contact with the sick seems to reduce spread. Social distancing, in a primitive form, becomes common practice. For you, daily life has become almost unrecognizable. The rhythms and routines that once structured your days have been disrupted or abandoned. Simple activities, going to market, attending church, visiting neighbors, now carry the risk of exposure to deadly disease. Hygiene practices have changed dramatically. Before the plague, you might have visited the public bathhouse weekly or monthly, depending on your status and resources. Now, those bathhouses are closed, seen as dangerous breeding grounds for disease. Instead, you clean yourself with vinegar-soaked cloths, believing the strong smell will protect you from miasma. You carry a pomander of aromatic herbs when you must venture outside, holding it to your nose in crowded areas or when passing houses marked with the red cross of plague. Your home, once merely dirty by modern standards, is now regularly fumigated with smoke from burning juniper branches or rosemary. The pungent smell makes your eyes water but seems a small price to pay for potential protection. Food and water are sources of anxiety. Some believe the plague can be transmitted through contaminated food, leading to elaborate preparation rituals. Bread is carefully examined for signs of spoilage that might indicate poisoning. Water from public wells is viewed with suspicion, especially after rumors of deliberate contamination spread. Many people turn to alcohol instead of water, drinking ale, beer, or wine with most meals. The brewing and fermentation processes make these beverages safer than potentially contaminated water, though no one understands the science behind this yet. They just know that people who drink alcohol seem to get sick less often than those who drink primarily water. Your clothing receives less attention than before. Washing clothes is a labor-intensive process involving heating water, scrubbing with lye, a harsh soap made from ashes and fat, and hanging to dry. With so many other concerns, laundry becomes less frequent. Better to wear dirty clothes than risk the supposed dangers of water contact. Plus, some believe that changing clothes too often might make you more vulnerable to disease. The layer of dirt and oils on well-worn garments is seen as a potential barrier against harmful miasma. This theory, like so many others, has no basis in reality but becomes accepted wisdom in a time of desperate fear. Sleep is difficult. The constant anxiety, the sounds of suffering from nearby houses, the uncertainty of whether you'll wake in the morning or develop symptoms during the night, all conspire to make rest elusive. Many report vivid nightmares when they do sleep, their subconscious processing the horrors of daily life. Despite all these precautions and changes to daily life, the plague continues its deadly work. Neighbors, friends, family members fall ill and die, often within days of showing symptoms. The lucky few who recover are left weakened, sometimes with permanent physical reminders like scars from burst buboes. You've heard stories of entire villages wiped out, of cities where half the population has died, of regions where the living can barely keep up with burying the dead. Some say the end of the world has come, that this is God's final judgment on a sinful humanity. Others look for earthly explanations: poisoned wells, unfavorable planetary alignments, miasma from decomposing bodies. No one suspects the actual culprits, the rats that scurry through streets and homes carrying fleas infected with Yersinia pestis bacteria. These tiny insects jump from rats to humans, delivering the deadly bacterium through their bites. In some cases, the infection spreads to the lungs, allowing direct transmission from person to person through coughing and sneezing. This complex chain of transmission won't be understood for centuries. In the meantime, people do what they can with the knowledge they have, implementing hygiene and protection measures that range from moderately helpful to actively harmful to completely irrelevant. And through it all, life somehow continues. People still work when they can, still eat and drink, still find moments of connection and even joy amidst the horror. The human spirit proves remarkably resilient, even in the face of catastrophe on an almost unimaginable scale. As another day ends, you return to your home, carefully washing your hands and face with vinegar water before eating a simple meal. The smell of burning rosemary fills the small space, mingling with the aroma of cooking food. Through the thin walls, you can hear your neighbor coughing. You try not to think about what that might mean. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, more death, more fear, more desperate measures against an enemy no one truly understands. But for now, there's food, shelter, and the fact that, at least for today, you've survived. Your breathing slows a bit, the weight of medieval existence heavy on your chest but somehow not crushing. The tension in your shoulders releases slightly as you imagine those vinegar-soaked cloths, the sting in your nostrils almost comforting in its harshness. You shift positions, settling deeper into your modern bed as the medieval town around you grows quiet, except for the occasional sound of the death cart's wheels on cobblestones as it makes its rounds, collecting the day's victims. While the death cart makes its grim rounds through the narrow streets, some people are surviving. Not many, but some. And the question everyone's asking is, why them? Why do some people catch the plague and die within days, while others living in the same house remain healthy? Nobody has the right answer, of course. They won't for centuries, but they have plenty of theories, and these theories shape how people approach hygiene and health during this nightmare. Some believe it's purely divine selection, God choosing who lives and who dies based on spiritual merit. Others think it has to do with the alignment of stars and planets at the time of your birth, or your particular balance of the four humours, and some notice patterns that are actually useful even if they don't understand why. One thing people start to realise, the wealthy seem to be dying at lower rates than the poor. This isn't universal. Plenty of nobles and rich merchants succumb to the Black Death, but overall, if you're well off, your chances are better. What they don't understand is why. We know now that it's partly because the wealthy have better nutrition, larger homes with less crowding, the ability to flee infected areas, and access to better medical care, though better is relative in the 14th century. But they also have certain